Some rides seem ordinary, but they open the door to a nightmare no one could have predicted. A strange passenger, a forgotten takeout box, and a secret that would haunt the driver forever. This is the story you're about to hear. My name is Michael Harris. I'm 42 years old, and I've been driving Uber in Chicago, Illinois for over 6 years now. Most nights are routine. Drunks from Wrigleyville, tired businessmen catching late flights, couples arguing in the back seat, it's all part of the job. But one night in late October 2018, during the cold season when the wind off Lake Michigan makes your bones ache, I had an encounter that still haunts me. I need to tell this story, though every time I revisit it, I feel that same paralyzing fear crawl up my spine. It was almost 1 o'clock in the morning, and I had just wrapped up a long ride that took me from the South Loop all the way out toward the West Side. My plan was simple: turn off the app, head home, and finally get some rest. The streets were quiet, nearly deserted at that hour, with the city lights stretching shadows across the cracked sidewalks like dark fingers reaching for something unseen. That was when I noticed him. A man stood alone at the corner of Madison and Halsted, a place that always felt unsettling once the night grew late. He was tall and thin, wrapped in a heavy coat, with the hood drawn low enough to shadow most of his face. He carried nothing, no bag, no phone, not even the restless fidgeting most people display when waiting for a ride. He just stood there perfectly still, as if the darkness itself had placed him on that corner, waiting for me and no one else. I slowed down, debating whether I should pretend not to see him, but before I could make up my mind, he stepped closer to the car. He leaned toward the open window, his voice low, casual, and strangely calm. "You still driving?" he asked. "Yeah," I replied after a beat, my tone cautious. "Where you headed?" His answer sent an unexpected chill racing down my spine. "Nowhere specific. Just drive. I'll tell you when to stop." The request was wrong in so many ways. Every instinct I had screamed at me to shake my head, press the gas, and leave him standing on that corner. The city was full of strange people at night, but this one felt different. Something about him carried an edge I could not name. My chest tightened with unease, and for a moment I considered simply refusing. But then exhaustion crept in, whispering that it was easier to give in. I had been driving for hours, my eyes burning from staring at traffic lights and empty streets. The temptation of one last fare, just a few more dollars before heading home, tilted the scales. Against my better judgment, I nodded reluctantly. "All right," I muttered, my voice low, "but I'll have to charge whatever the meter racks up." "That's fine," he answered quickly. His tone carried no inflection, no hint of impatience or relief. It was as flat and cold as the night air pressing against the windshield. Without another word, he opened the back door and slid silently into the seat behind me. His movements were oddly smooth, too deliberate, as though rehearsed. The faint sound of the door latching shut echoed louder than it should have in the empty street. As I pulled away from the curb, I couldn't help glancing in the mirror. His hood still covered most of his face, but I could feel the weight of his presence pressing into the small space of the car. And though I told myself it was just another passenger, some part of me knew better. The very first thing that caught my attention was the container he carried. It was a plain white styrofoam takeout box, the cheap kind you usually get from late-night diners or corner joints that never bother with presentation. He wasn't holding it casually either. Instead, he clutched it close to his chest with both hands, gripping it tightly, as though it were something rare or deeply valuable, almost like a treasure he couldn't risk losing. After a moment, he leaned forward slightly and asked, his voice calm but strangely hollow, "Mind if I eat back here?" I forced myself to give a polite laugh, even though I already felt uneasy. "As long as you don't spill anything," I replied, trying to sound casual, like it was no big deal. But he didn't laugh back. Not even the smallest hint of amusement touched his voice or his face. Without saying another word, he placed the box on his lap, flipped open the lid, and began to eat. The stench struck immediately. It wasn't the normal smell of greasy fast food, the kind I was used to scrubbing out of the seats after drunken passengers left behind fries, half-eaten burgers, or spilled sodas. No, this odor was entirely different. It rolled through the car like a wave, thick and suffocating. It was rancid, metallic, and sour, the unmistakable stench of rotting flesh, like spoiled meat that had been left outside in the heat of summer, forgotten until it became something unholy. My stomach lurched violently. For a second, I had to grip the wheel tighter to steady myself. The smell was so overpowering that bile rose in my throat. I forced my eyes toward the rearview mirror. His face was shrouded in shadow, the hood of his coat covering much of his expression. Still, I could see enough. His jaw worked furiously, moving with a frantic energy as he shoveled whatever was inside that box into his mouth. He was eating greedily, almost desperately, like someone who hadn't tasted food in days and was terrified it might be taken away. Each bite came with an awful sound, wet, sloppy, and revolting. The smacking and squelching noises filled the silence of the car, a grotesque rhythm that made my skin crawl. I felt sweat bead at the back of my neck, not from heat but from the raw discomfort that gripped me. I turned my head slightly and cracked the window, letting in a blast of icy night air. The wind stunned my face, but it gave me something to focus on, something that wasn't the smell. Still, I shivered, and I told myself it was only because of the cold. Deep down, I knew better. The truth was, I couldn't shake the growing sense that what he was eating wasn't food at all. For nearly 10 minutes, I drove aimlessly through the city while he sat in the back seat devouring his meal. The sound of his chewing filled the silence, each wet bite gnawing at my nerves. Outside, the streets became emptier and darker, the familiar skyline fading as the tall buildings gave way to long, desolate stretches lined with industrial warehouses. The neon glow of downtown was gone, replaced by shadows, rusted fences, and endless silence. "Here," he ordered suddenly. "Pull over." I glanced around. We were crawling along a nearly abandoned section of Cicero Avenue. Shuttered factories loomed on either side, their broken windows like dark, watching eyes. Chain-link fences rattled faintly in the cold wind. Not a single soul was in sight. "I can't let you out here," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "This isn't safe. Let me find." "Stop. Here." His voice was low, deliberate, and filled with a menace that froze me instantly. My chest tightened as adrenaline rushed through me. Heart pounding, I eased the car toward the curb and stopped. That's when he smiled. It was the first expression I'd seen on his face all night. Slowly, he reached forward and pressed a crumpled $10 bill into my hand. Without another word, he stepped out of the car and shut the door softly behind him. I exhaled, my body sagging with relief. But the feeling lasted only a few seconds. Because he didn't walk away. Instead, he moved into the middle of the empty street, turned back toward me, and began to laugh. It was a deep, guttural laugh, echoing off the cold metal walls of the warehouses. Under the flickering streetlight, his silhouette seemed inhuman. I slammed the gas pedal and sped away, never looking back. When I finally arrived home, still trembling from the bizarre encounter earlier that night, I sat motionless for a moment in the driver's seat. My knuckles were white against the steering wheel, breath shallow, heart pounding with the ghost of adrenaline that hadn't yet faded. Eventually, I forced myself to move, trying to convince my mind that I was safe now, that the night was over. But when I stepped out and opened the back door of my car, intending only to check for wrappers or spilled drinks, I saw it. The man had left the styrofoam container behind. It sat on the floor mat, half tilted, waiting for me like some grotesque gift. I groaned aloud, already recognizing the sour odor that rose up from it. The stench was stronger now than it had been in the car, thicker, clinging to the air around me like a rancid fog. It was sour and nauseating, sharp enough to sting my throat, and my stomach twisted violently at the smell. I turned my head away, trying to breathe through my mouth. Still, I couldn't leave it. Holding my breath, I reached down and picked up the container gingerly, gripping it between two fingers as though touching it too firmly might contaminate me. I carried it toward the trash can at the side of the house, my steps uneven, my mind screaming that I should just throw it in and walk away, forget I ever saw it. But curiosity is a cruel thing. It pricks at reason, needles past common sense, and whispers questions you should never answer. And so, against all logic, against the rising bile in my throat, I stopped. I looked down at the container. My hand shook. Every nerve screamed to drop it, but my fingers betrayed me, peeling the lid back. I wish I hadn't. Inside was not the greasy remains of diner food. It was not scraps of fries or half-eaten chicken. No, what sat inside was something infinitely worse. A human eye. The sight froze me, rooted me to the ground as the world around me seemed to narrow. The eye rested in the center of the box, blood still clinging to its edges, congealing into a dark, sticky crust. The iris, pale and glassy, stared upward, unblinking. It looked alive, as though it could still see, as though it were studying me even in death. I gasped, a ragged sound that tore at my throat. The container slipped from my hands. I gagged violently as the box hit the pavement, its lid snapping back. The eye rolled free, tumbling across the rough concrete before coming to rest against the toe of my shoe. I froze again. For a heartbeat, I couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't even think. The eye seemed to look straight into me, its gaze fixed and merciless. My legs gave out beneath me, and I stumbled backward, barely catching myself against the side of the car. I gasped for air, my chest heaving, pulse hammering so violently that my vision blurred. My throat convulsed as if I might vomit. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out, only the ragged rasp of my own panic. I pressed myself against the car, staring down at that single eye, still lodged against my shoe, as though it had chosen me. The night felt impossibly silent, the shadows pressing closer. Every instinct told me to run, to flee, to abandon the car, the box, everything. But I couldn't. I just stood there, shaking, as the reality sank in. The man hadn't simply left behind trash. He had left me a message. I burst into my apartment, babbling incoherently. My girlfriend, Emily, saw the state I was in, and when I finally managed to explain, her face went pale. "We have to call the police," she insisted. I didn't want to. Every paranoid thought flooded my head. What if the man came back? What if reporting this put me in danger? But Emily wouldn't let it go. She dialed 911. Minutes later, 2 squad cars arrived. The officers inspected the box, and their expressions turned grim. One muttered something into his radio, his hand trembling slightly. They questioned me relentlessly, writing down every detail I could recall, his height, his voice, the smell, his laugh. Then one of them leaned closer and said, almost in a whisper, "Just hours ago, a body was found downtown. A homeless man. Parts of him were missing, including one eye." My stomach turned to ice. For weeks after, I lived in fear. I couldn't drive without scanning every face, every shadow. Every time a passenger climbed into the back seat, I flinched. I started noticing strange things. A dark car idling across the street from my apartment late at night. the faint sound of laughter echoing in my dreams, and sometimes, I swore, in the real world. Once, after finishing a ride, I found greasy fingerprints smeared on the inside of my back window. Fingerprints I hadn't seen when the passenger entered. Was it him? Was he following me? Emily said I was just paranoid. But paranoia feels real when you know monsters exist. One night, about 2 months later, I was working late again, against my better judgment. A notification pinged on my Uber app, the pickup, just 2 blocks away. I hesitated. The street name chilled me. It was the same corner where I had picked up the man with the box. Every rational part of me screamed not to go. But my finger, almost against my will, accepted the ride. When I arrived, the street was empty. No passengers, no pedestrians. Just silence. Then, slowly, the back door of my car opened. No one sat down. But the door closed. The weight of the car shifted, as if someone invisible had entered. The smell hit me instantly: rot, blood, decay. My vision blurred with panic. I stomped on the accelerator, speeding blindly through the night. I didn't dare look in the mirror. But I could feel it, eyes watching me from the back seat. I screamed, begging whatever it was to leave. My voice cracked, my throat raw. Finally, at an intersection, I slammed the brakes and leapt out. The car rocked as though something heavy had shifted inside. But when I circled back, flinging open the rear door, nothing. The seat was empty, except for a single blood-stained napkin, resting exactly where the box had been months before. That was the last night I ever drove for Uber. I sold the car, quit the job, and moved out of Chicago within weeks. But the nightmare followed. Sometimes, when I walk past a diner, the smell of spoiled meat hits me, and I gag. Sometimes I wake at 3 a.m., hearing their guttural laugh in the darkness. And sometimes, when I catch my reflection in the bathroom mirror, I swear one of my eyes doesn't quite look like it belongs to me anymore. As if it's watching something else. As if it's his. People ask me why I quit driving, why I never set foot in Chicago again. I tell them the truth. Because once you've looked into the back seat and seen the impossible, once you've smelled death and realized it's sitting inches behind you, you never feel safe again. That night, I didn't just drive a fare. I drove a monster. And he left a piece of his meal behind. A reminder that in the city, in the dead of night, you never know who's stepping into your car. Or what they brought with them.